Today, I want to give you an overview of diminished patterns. And so I want to start with diminished chords, then we'll do some arpeggios, and then look at the diminished scales. And I'm doing them in that order because I think it's the order of most functional to most kind of theoretical. And so the chords, diminished chords, are very useful for passing chords, moving between different chords in a chord family, for instance, or using as a substitute for a 5 chord in a minor key or even a major key. And so those, I think, are most functional. Diminished arpeggios are also very functional for soloing and making interesting sounding lines in your solos. And then the diminished scales are less applicable and functional. You can still use them, and there's a lot of interesting ways to use them, but they're a little more kind of on the outer edges of what you would normally use in a solo. So we're going to go through it in that order, and I just want to give you kind of a basic overview. I think that even if you're familiar with some diminished patterns, that you'll find this useful, and if you're new to it, this will be a nice introduction to help kind of give you an overview of all these different things. So I'm just going to jump in, and we're going to start with some diminished chord patterns. So to begin, I just want to show on one string the diminished 7th chord arpeggio, because I think this gives you a good idea of how the diminished chord is built. And diminished chords are interesting because they're built with a symmetrical interval pattern. So as contrast, a major chord arpeggio would be the interval starting from the first note to the second note of it would be a major third and then a minor third. And if we go up to the octave, that'd be a perfect fourth. Or if you did a major 7th chord, it'd be a major third, a minor third, and then a major third. So you have these different intervals. With a diminished 7th chord, you're talking about a structure that has all minor thirds. So those minor thirds have a very tense sound. But it is interesting to have a chord that is splitting the octave into 4 equal parts. So one of the cool things about diminished 7th chords is that because they're symmetrical, all of the inversion shapes are identical. So when you take any type of chord, say a major 7 chord, and you invert it, you're going to have 4 different shapes that are very different from one another in the way that they are fingered on the guitar. However, with a diminished chord, not so. You have the exact same shape, movable in minor thirds. So the first one we're going to do is on the first 4 strings. And this shape is a 4-finger shape. You've got, here I'm playing the 2nd fret on the 4th string, the 3rd fret on the 3rd string, 2nd fret on the 2nd string, and 3rd fret on the 1st string. And to invert this, all I have to do is move it up a minor third. So as you'll notice, that is an easy inversion. And you also may notice that the sound of this does not sound stable at all. So you wouldn't want to start writing a song by just strumming, try to sing something or play something over that. It's very unstable. It's really a chord that wants to resolve somewhere. So I'm going to cover just a common resolution, which is going from diminished 7th chord to a minor 7th chord. So I'm going from this diminished chord, which, because it's symmetrical, it can be called by any of the notes in the chord. So this could be E diminished, B flat diminished, C sharp diminished, or G diminished, here I'm going to resolve it to a D minor 7 chord. And I've got a visual on the screen here, and the circles that are empty are the chords that I'm going to be resolving to, and then the circles that are colored in the different colors are your different diminished chords. Obviously they're all the same arrangement of your fingers, but I just wanted to make the different colors so that you could easily see the different inversions of it, and especially when we get into the other string sets, I think those different colors will be helpful. So I'm going from this diminished chord to this D minor 7 chord. And in this case, because I'm going to the D minor 7, the most accurate name for this would be the C sharp 7 diminished 7 chord. Because C sharp is the leading tone, or the half step away from the root note that I'm landing on, the D minor 7. So I'm calling this a C sharp minor 7 chord because I'm resolving to the the C sharp diminished 7 chord because I'm resolving to a D minor 7. So this is functioning as kind of a leading tone into my D minor 7 chord. So the first exercise I want to do is just starting on this D minor 7 and holding that for 4 beats. I'll count it in a moment, and then going to this voicing and inverting it up all the way up to here where we can play the same voicing we started with. D minor 7, just an octave up. So I've got D minor 7, and I'm thinking about this time-wise for the exercise. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the first little exercise, and we can do that in reverse as well. So once I land up here and I wait, I hold that for a whole note, 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can go back down. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And again, I can repeat it. 3, 4. So I think that's a good starting point. And we're going to do that on the different string sets to illustrate the other shapes that we have. So today I'm just covering what's called close, well, they're not close position. I'm covering 4 string shapes that are on 4 adjacent strings. So these diminished chords and these minor 7 chords I'm playing right now are on the 1st through the 4th string. There are some common diminished voicings where you would have a skipped string, like for instance having something like this where I'm skipping the 5th string. I'm playing the 6th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, but I'm not going to cover those today just because this is not a complete in-depth explication of all the diminished patterns that are possible, but this is kind of an introduction, as I said, to these patterns and how you could use them. So the next one, we're going to look at D minor 7, same exact chord as this, just on the next string set, and this is a very common shape. It's just like a typical minor bar chord, except I'm not playing the 1st string here. I'm not actually barring on the 1st string. I am going to bar on the 3rd string though to get that flat 7 of the D minor 7, that C note here. I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the 1st through 4th string. Now I'm on the 2nd through 5th string. So the diminished shape here, I'm just going to go up to E, and now my shape is here. I've got the 7th fret on the 5th string, I've got the 8th fret on the 4th string, got the 6th fret on the 3rd string, and the 8th fret again on the 2nd string. And just like up here, we can invert this shape by simply moving it in minor thirds. And the exercise we're going to do is the exact same as we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the next string set. And this chord up here, just like we did on the first 4 strings, on strings 2 through 5 here, we're going to be playing the same D minor 7 voicing an octave up. 2, 4, 3, 4. So that's another voicing for the diminished 7th chord. We've got this one, we've got this one, and now we're going to do this one. And notice how the notes are all the same. I'm playing E, B flat, C sharp, G here, doing the same notes here, and the same notes here. And something that I've talked about before, but is worth noting, is that the difference when you have a completely identical chord structure being played on a different string, or even just a single note, you've got a big difference in what's called the timbre, which is the overall tonal quality of the sound of the chord or the note. And that's due to the difference in size of the strings. So if I play this chord here on these little strings, and I'm accentuating by kind of plucking towards the bridge, and then I go over here and play the same notes, it's a much darker sound on these bigger strings. The natural EQ of the bigger strings is going to have more low-end frequencies because of the size of the string, so that's an interesting difference that I can use as an effect in where I choose to play something. So we're going to do this one slightly different because in the key of D minor, where we're playing this, I don't want to go all the way up from here. It just gets a little cumbersome way up high, and I don't even have access to the D minor 7 chord way up here. I wouldn't really want to play it there anyway. So I'm going to rearrange these by going from this diminished chord. I'm going to invert up, and then I'm going to invert again, except this time I'm going to go down an octave to the 6th fret on the 6th string, and then back to where I started. So the arrangement of the fingers on this, as you can see on the chart, is I've got 12th fret on the 6th string, I've got 13th fret with my pinky on the 5th string, I've got 11th fret on the 4th string with my first finger, and then my 3rd finger is playing the 12th fret at the 4th string, 3rd string, excuse me. So I'm going to go from here up a minor 3rd to the 15th fret on the 6th string, then I'm going to jump down to the 6th fret on the 6th string, then up to the 9th fret before resolving to my D minor 7 chord. And this D minor 7 is just like it's taken out of your regular E-shaped bar chord at the 10th fret, but then I'm dropping the 2nd root note up here on the 4th string down to my bar at the 10th fret. And I'm playing strings 6, 5, 4, 3. So here's my pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then backwards, I'm going to do the opposite. So that's a nice little chord exercise. I'll go back through all three of those, starting at the strings 1 through 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Then strings 2 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Then strings 4 through 6. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. So that's the first portion of this lesson. I want to cover one more thing before we move on from the chords to the arpeggios, and that is a common way that these occur in a major pattern. So if you take, say, a C major 7, a common place that you'll find these diminished chords is a passing chord between two chords in the chord family. And I'm going to take a C major 7 to a D minor 7 to an E minor 7. But I'm going to add a diminished chord in between each of them. So that's an interesting way that you might hear diminished chords. In something like in some kind of jazz song, or even a pop song or country song. And if I kept going, I could play an F major 7. If I want to do it again, I could go up to a G7. There I've walked up the first 5 chords of the C major chord family, connecting each one with a diminished chord, except I did not do that in between the E minor 7 and the F major 7. It's partially because there's only a half step between E and F, and those diminished chords were walking up to the note that's in between the two chord or scale tones. So I've got C major 7, C sharp diminished 7, D minor 7, D sharp diminished 7, E minor 7, F major 7, F sharp diminished 7, G7. So that's a common way that diminished chords are used in popular music of all different styles. And if you came across something like that, you can of course invert your diminished chords, because you're not changing the chord by moving in those minor thirds. So I could go C major 7 to C sharp diminished 7 and invert it up. Go to my D minor 7, go to my D sharp diminished 7, invert it up. Go to an E minor 7, F major 7, F sharp diminished 7, walk around with those inversions, and I've got an interesting way to add some movement into my chord pattern. So that's a common way that diminished chords get used, and you can play around with that and hopefully have some fun. So this next section, we're going to move into the diminished arpeggios. And diminished arpeggios are some really cool sounding patterns. And I'm playing with like a nice clean tone here, more of kind of a jazz kind of sound or R&B, or my Strat doesn't doesn't do jazz the best, although it does sound very nice. Typically, typically I would play this kind of sound on more of an R&B or soul kind of gig, or funk or whatever. But you can use diminished 7 arpeggios in all kinds of music, and it can be something that you place into a solo even when there's not a diminished chord happening, because it can act as a way to build tension, to play a little bit outside of the harmony. Something like that. If you're playing over a minor, D minor 7, we're going to do D minor 7 again. And I'm going to show these arpeggio patterns in 2 parts. We're going to do ascending patterns, resolving to a chord, a D minor 7 chord. And then we're going to take the same arpeggio patterns, descending, and resolve to some other chord voicings. And on these pictures, you've got the chord voicings in, again, the empty circles, just like they were on the first patterns that I put on the screen. And the different colors of the filled in circles indicate the first position of the arpeggio being the yellow, the second position being the pink, and you'll notice that there's some split color dots on the fretboard. Those split colors are notes that are shared between 2 of the arpeggios. So we've got yellow being the first arpeggio, the pink ones being the second arpeggio, the blue ones being the third, and the orange ones being the fourth. So that's a way that you can kind of hopefully tell those arpeggios apart, so that when you're looking at this, you can easily follow this. But just like the chords invert without changing your pattern, these arpeggio patterns are the exact same in each position. So I'm going to go from this D minor 7, I'm going to play this D note, and then I'm going to slip back a half step to start my arpeggio on C sharp. And I'm doing 2 notes on the 5th string, 1 note on the 4th string, 2 notes on the 3rd string, 1 note on the 2nd string, 2 notes on the 1st string, before resolving back to my chord. So if I go from the D and you can hear how that's a very smooth way to bring us back to our D note. So just before I move on to the next inversion of that, I just want to show you an example of how I could be playing a solo over a D minor. And use this diminished arpeggio as a way to build tension, and it can work even while the D minor 7 is still playing. Of course, some of those diminished notes are going to sound a little outside, and outside of the harmony. That's a term that is used commonly to refer to notes that are technically, you'd think of them as wrong notes, but you can play wrong notes as long as you have some direction to where you're going with them, and you bring them back inside. So outside, back to inside. This is a really cool concept that I use a lot in my improvisation to build tension. So that's that would be one way to do it. Another use for this would be if I had a 5 chord. I'm playing an A7, sharp 5, sharp 9. Or if you just had a regular A7. the diminished arpeggio fits right over that 5 chord of D minor 7. So if you had a 5 resolving to a 1, your 1 being the minor, D minor 7, A7 to D7, D minor 7, you could use a diminished arpeggio to make a nice sound over that A7 chord. You'd be playing technically an A7 flat 9 arpeggio, which in a minor key works very nicely. So we're going to move on to the next one. So if I do this first one, there's my first one. Next, I'm going to go to the minor third of D minor 7. This is an F. This is at the 8th fret of the 5th string. I'm going to use that chord tone of the D minor 7 arpeggio, which, if I did it on one string, would be these notes. As I go through, I'm going to use each of these chord tones as a launching point for my diminished arpeggio. So I'm going to go from the flat 3 of D, the F note, 8th fret of the 5th string, drop to the 2nd of D, which is an E, and now I'm going to play my exact same diminished arpeggio. It's the exact same pattern I played before. And now I'm going to resolve it to this D minor 7 chord. And this one is simply barred across the first 4 strings. I've got my D, my A, my F, and my C. 1, 5, flat 3, flat 7. My flat 7 is on the bottom, so this would be called a third inversion, but this is a D minor 7. If I put that D on bottom, you can really hear the harmony. Voicings like this, where you're playing the flat 7 on bottom, or one of these inversions that doesn't sound as obviously D minor 7, that gets cleared up if you're playing with a bass player, or if you, like I did, just kind of tap that D on the 6th string. So back to the arpeggio. That's my second position of it. So I got my first position, my second position of it, and as I said before, the arpeggio shape I'm doing is exactly the same. And the next one, still exactly the same, but we're just going to resolve it to a different place, and we're going to start from a different place. So we're going to start here, as I did before. I'm going to go up to the next chord tone of D minor 7, which would be this A at the 12th fret of the 5th string, and I'm going to use that note to launch into my diminished arpeggio by going down a whole step from A to G, and up my diminished arpeggio. And here I'm going to play this D minor 7 voicing, which is the same one we did when we did the initial chord pattern that I showed you. So from A, resolving to that D minor 7. So the first 3, and just like we did before, we're going to start from the next chord tone up from A, where we started the third pattern on. This is a C, flat 7 of the D minor 7 chord, and now we're going to drop a whole step down to B flat and play the exact same diminished 7 arpeggio pattern. Then we're going to resolve to this inversion first inversion of a D minor 7. And this chord is a, like I said, first inversion D minor 7. I'm just barring this first finger to catch the 15th fret on the 4th and the 2nd string. And then I've got the 17th fret with these two fingers on the 3rd and the 1st string. And the arrangement of the notes in this chord is the flat 3, the flat 7, the 1, and the 5. So from that flat 7 on the 5th string. So now we've got a whole exercise of these ascending diminished arpeggios. So starting from here. And if I went again, I'd be back to the one I started with, just an octave up. And I think I got trailed off on that point earlier, but these patterns aren't just jazz patterns. I've heard a lot of really cool diminished runs in other styles of music like metal and rock and stuff like that. So no matter what your musical interests are as far as genre goes, you're going to be able to apply these if you want to. So the next level of this is we're just going to look at the same arpeggios but in a descending pattern. So going down from the higher notes to the lower notes, and we're going to use some different chord voicings on this one. So we'll use that same chord voicing that we did before. And just like I did with the ascending arpeggio pattern, going from a chord tone to the beginning of the arpeggio, I'm going to go from a chord tone here, but instead of going down, I'm just going to go up from the 5th to the flat 6 of the D minor, which is a B flat note. Oops. And I'm going to descend that same pattern. Then I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to go up to the next chord tone of the D minor 7 chord, the flat 7, which is C, 8th fret on the 1st string, and I'm going to go up a half step to the C sharp and then go down my diminished pattern. And here, the chord I'm going to play is a first inversion D minor 7. It's the inversion of this one, just up one inversion, and this is a bit of a stretch. I've got my second finger at the 8th fret of the 5th string, my third finger at the 10th fret of the 4th string, first finger at the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and my 4th finger at the 10th fret of the 2nd string. And that's the same as this inversion, just on the next string set down, in an octave down. So from there, I've got, well, I'll go back to the first one. The second one. Then I'm up to the next chord tone, which is D, the root note, at the 10th fret on the 1st string. Then I'm going to go up a whole step and do my same arpeggio down, resolving to this second inversion D minor 7 chord, 12th fret 5th string, 12th fret 4th string, 10th fret 3rd string, and 13th fret on the 2nd string. And then finally, I'm going to go to the flat 3, the F on the first string, 13th fret, and I'm going to go up a whole step here, and then go down my same arpeggio shape, and now I'm going to resolve to this one, which is a third inversion again, just like we did here, except it's going to be a different fingering because it's on the next string set. We've got 15th fret, 5th string, 15th fret, 4th string, 14th fret, 3rd string, and 15th fret on the 2nd string. So that's the complete 4-part arpeggio exercise. We'll do it from the beginning. 2, 3, 4. And that's the full exercise. So if we put those together, we could go like this. Put the ascending and descending together. That makes a pretty cool exercise. You can also, of course, use these in any way. You can take the ascending and go back down the descending. Of course, in any of these positions, you can go up and down them. And do any combination. Obviously, use your imagination. Come up with some different ways to play them. But it always helps to resolve to the chord that you're, that's kind of the parent key or the key that you're in. And this also sounds cool and pretty tense in a kind of outside kind of way if you do it with a major chord. So resolving to a major chord is also a nice way to, a nice sound. Okay, so that is the arpeggio section. We've got the chord section, the arpeggio section. Now we're just going to look at what I think of as kind of, I don't want to say just theoretical, but it is a little more difficult to implement in a musical way. I'll admit that. But I think that it's interesting nonetheless, and I think that it's useful. There's some interesting players that will implement this type of thing. One song specifically that comes to mind is a great song by the guitarist Jimmy Herring, who's a fabulous guitar player, and he has a song called Scapegoat Blues, where it's kind of a like a shredding, bluesy funk kind of rock number, instrumental tune, where the A section is kind of a bluesy type pattern, but then the B section goes into a very diminished. It's totally diminished. It's all diminished scale stuff. So it's very kind of out sounding. Sounds very cool. But if you want to explore a song, listen to a song that uses the diminished scale in an interesting way, check out Scapegoat Blues by Jimmy Herring. So what I'm going to show you first is the two types of diminished scales on one string using the vertical plane, the horizontal plane of the guitar, as I've talked about it before. And this is just worth repeating that the way I see the guitar is in these two fundamental planes. We have the vertical plane and the horizontal plane. The vertical plane is when we switch between strings, patterns like this, or like scale patterns like this. And then the horizontal plane is when we move horizontally across the neck, like. And playing the guitar is really kind of a marriage of these two different planes, and understanding scales and arpeggios and everything first on the horizontal plane is the way that I approach things. I find it to be way easier than trying to learn something like a diminished scale, especially, but even major scales, modes, minor scales, everything. I find it way easier to wrap my head around them on the horizontal plane first, because it allows me to just forget about 5 of the 6 strings and just look at a single pattern using the spacing of the frets and the intervals on one string to understand how it is built better, so that none of the complexities of switching strings are there to confuse me. So I'm going to present this first on the first string, just one string. So we've got 2 ways to play a diminished scale, and that is it, because it's a symmetrical scale. Essentially, a diminished scale is just an alternating pattern between a whole step and then a half step. And so the other way you can do it is going a half step and then a whole step. So we're going to start with a half whole diminished. So this is where you take your starting note, you go a half step, then you move a whole step, then you move a half step, then you move a whole step, and a half step, then a whole step, half step, or whole step. So it's half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole. And it's an 8-note scale. Eight notes before you get back to the octave. And that's unique. Most of the scales we use are septatonic, 7 notes per octave, or pentatonic, 5 notes per octave. You have these octatonic diminished scales, and then you have also the whole tone scale, which is 6, which is our other symmetrical pattern that we're not talking about today, but might be fun to dive into that in the future in a lesson. But for today, we've got our half whole diminished, and the opposite of that is the whole half. So starting with a whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So the whole half again. So the intervals of these scales, as compared against the spelling of a major scale, this would be, we've got our 1, flat 2. I'm going back to the half whole here. So we got 1, flat 2, flat 3, our major 3, sharp 4, or flat 5, the 5, regular 5th, the 6th, the natural 6th of a major scale, the flat 7 of a major scale, and 1. So 1, flat 2, flat 3, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. Whereas the whole half diminished is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, sharp 5, 6, 7, 1. So you've got a major 7 in there, you've got a sharp 5, and a flat 5. Of course, if you were spelling this just in relation to itself, you'd have 8 notes, but I don't find that very helpful. I think that spelling it in relation to the major scale is much more helpful. So the final thing that we're going to do is look at 6-string scale shapes for these 2 diminished scales. And we're going to start both of them from the 7th fret of the 6th string, and we're going to go from there to the octave, 2 octaves up, and then turn around and go back down. And the interesting thing about an 8-note scale is that when you're playing in 4/4 time and you're playing 8th notes, you always land on the note that you started on. So if I start on the root note, this is a B, I'm going to be playing a B half-whole diminished scale. You land on the same beat that you started on. So if I play my 8-note scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I've landed on the B again on 1. And just to tease something that I'm going to be releasing probably next week, there is a version of the major scale called the bebop major scale, which is an 8-note major scale. It just adds 1 extra note in between the 5th and 6th of the scale, but it turns the regular major scale into an 8-note scale that has some really great implications for rhythm, and gets used a lot in bebop music, jazz music, because of that, and has some really fascinating harmony that goes along with it. And that's something I'm going to explore in a lesson that will be coming out soon. But for now, we're talking about the diminished scale. So this rhythmic element makes it nice to practice going 2 full octaves and back down, because you're not ending up, you're ending on, every beat 1 is going to hit the root note. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Whoops. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So rhythmically it fits really nice. So I'm going to go over this in more detail. We're going to start with our 3-note pattern on the 6th string. It's going to be a half whole, and then we got to go a half step to the 5th string, 6th fret. We've got, then we've got a whole step, half step. Then we need to go a whole step to the next string, half step, whole step to our root note again. So the first octave, from there, because we just ended up, our last movement was a whole step, we got to go a half step. So we got to stretch to a half step on the next string. So if I play this octave starting from here, I got whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. My whole pattern goes like this. And back down. So it's a pretty dense, interesting sounding scale, but some applications where I might use this would be over a dominant 7th chord. If a dominant 7th chord has a flat 9, anything like that, or if it has a flat 5 or a 13 with a flat 9, which is an extremely tense and spicy sounding chord. That would be one place where I could use this. I can also use this, like I mentioned earlier, to go outside of the harmony. And I wouldn't want to overuse it, but at a climactic point in a solo, going outside like that can be really cool. Really, really nice effect. So that is the whole half diminished scale. And just to kind of wrap this back around so that you can see how interesting these are in their symmetry. If I go up a minor third, my shape is exactly the same. So I'm playing the same scale notes. I'm just up a minor third, just like with our arpeggios. Or down a minor third. So the symmetry in these goes through all of the chords, the arpeggios, the scales. It's all symmetrical, and that's an interesting facet of these scales and arpeggios and chords. The other one is the whole half diminished. So we're going to do that from the same starting point. We're going to go from B, and now we've got whole step, half step, whole step to the next string, so 7th fret again, half step, whole step, half step, so I got to reach back 1 extra fret, whole step, half step, and that's my first octave. If I keep going from there, go a whole step to the next string, half step, whole step, half step. Don't have to reach as far here because it's going to from the 3rd to the 2nd string, which is 1 half step closer than the tuning of the other strings. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And the chords that you could play this one over are a little bit different. Of course, a diminished chord, but there's some really ugly sounding chords that I happen to love. Ugly sounding chords. So these are not chords you come across very often, but anyway, it's an interesting sound nonetheless. So that's the whole half diminished. Now, the final thing about this is that if you're going to play the diminished scale instead of taking your half whole and going up a minor third, if you wanted to just go up to the next note in the scale and start the scale, because it's either whole half or half whole. If I played the B and I say I'm at this chord, dominant 7 flat 5, if I went up to the next note in the scale, I'd be playing the whole half diminished pattern. So just the opposite pattern. Just starting from the next note in the scale, and then if I went up one more, I'd have my half whole pattern. If I went up one more, it'd be the whole half pattern. and so on. It just keeps repeating because it's symmetrical, and it's identical. You've got a scale here, you got one scale half whole, then your whole half scale here. It makes the same scale that you have there, it's just the next scale pattern, and then you repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. So that's all that I'm going to show you today, but hopefully this is interesting to you. I'm going to zoom back out, and so spend some time exploring with these ideas. Like I structured it today, the most useful ideas I tried to put forward first. The chords are definitely the most common, the things that I use the most in my playing. Arpeggios would be second, the scales kind of a distant third, but nonetheless very interesting, and can be a good exercise for you to practice a new sound. So get creative. Spend some time with these. I'd say in order to maximize the functionality of what you're doing, try resolving the chords and arpeggios to the home base you're playing on. So if you take a chord in any key, think about the chord that you're playing. Like, let's say you're playing, like we did, D minor 7. You're in the key of D minor. Go to that C sharp, the natural 7 of the D, and that would be where you'd start your arpeggio or your diminished chords. And also the same, because it inverts every minor third, you could go up to the 2, the E, or to the 4 of the D. I'm speaking of the natural 7, the 2, the 4, and the flat 6 would be the places that this diminished chord would intersect. Try an arpeggio pattern, then try to resolve to a chord tone, or try your diminished chords and then resolve to a chord voicing of your D minor 7. And hopefully you find some interesting ways to play with this and some creative sounds that you haven't tried before. I think it's a lot of fun. And if you followed me this far into this video, I'm assuming that you find this interesting, and that you might get some value out of these ideas. So that's all for today. I've got some more lessons coming up that will cover some interesting topics. I'm going to be looking at some slide guitar stuff coming up, looking at music theory and modes on a single string, specifically using slide guitar, but that will also apply even if you're not a slide player. We're just going to look deep into the modes of the major scale, modes of melodic minor, and then some more exotic scales. So that's coming up soon. And then going to be looking at the 8-note major scale that I referenced earlier pretty soon as well. And then I'm going to be kind of coming back around to some of the ideas that I've been talking about. We're going to look at chord melodies again. So if you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe. You can subscribe to my email list at practicemakesbettermusic.com. You can subscribe to me on YouTube, and I'm going to keep new things coming out for you to hopefully help you enjoy music more, dive into your playing, and to improve, and just to really get to know more about the ins and outs of how to understand the guitar and how to enjoy yourself more with music, no matter what level you're doing it at. So until next time, practice hard and remember to enjoy yourself. That's all for today. See you next time.